This is Ralph Losey. I'm in Joe Robaina's American Cane Self-Defense headquarters in Miami. I'm here to talk to one of the people featured in the new book, 100 Deadly Skills, Combat Edition. This is by a retired Navy SEAL, Clint Emerson. It's, as he calls it, a Navy SEAL's guide to crushing your enemy, fighting for your life, and embracing your inner badass. Now, Joe Robaina is one of the 100 badasses featured as one of the most deadly people with combat skills. And I'm here with him to ask him about this book today and urge everyone to look at this book. Go to page 109 where you'll find the chapter featuring Joe with his code name Cane Maestro, and there's a short instruction on one of the things that I'm studying now with Joe, and that is how to use a cane's horn as brass knuckles. And this is indeed a very important way to use the cane in order to do self-defense. And I'm going to ask Joe to comment now about this great new book that he, among many other badasses, some of the toughest people in the world here are featured in Clint Emerson's book, and you may want to check it out. It's really very entertaining, very amusing, has a terrific introduction and comments by Keith Melton, the international spy master. So check this out. Joe, tell us about this new book, 100 Deadly Skills. I mean, you seem like a very intimidating person, Joe.
Great, so thank you so much for having me.
Well, I have the microphone between us, so that gives me some defense because I can't help it. I've got the book here of the 100 Deadly Skills, and you're in it as one of the most dangerous people in America, which I think is it's your chance to talk about this new book. So, I mean, do I need this? I mean, how dangerous are you, Joe?
Well, it depends on who you talk to, but none of that is going to come to light here. Really, this is best-selling author Clint Emerson, and boy, we're just honored that he sought us out when it comes to the cane, and they're just really honored to be amongst that group and let others know. It has the particularity and the distinction, a lot of talent in that book. Some of them are friends, and we're the only ones in there for the cane, right? So you have a lot of empty hand skills and other tools in there. But boy, we're just very happy and privileged and honored to be able to serve that way with Clint.
Well, I know you didn't write this, and I probably don't get any of the royalty, but I'm sure it's a fun read, and it's great to see Joe be recognized for his leadership in this area. We're here for the intensive, so I don't want you to repeat what it is, because by the time people hear this, it'll be over, and you've already got that online. But tell me more in general. What is the role of these intensive personals in online training in general that we're morphing into more and more of online? How important and what role for you do the intensives play?
So the intensives is what complements the online training, and that's something we had. Caners worldwide were being trained by this, even pre-pandemic. This is the way we were delivering it. So when all this happened, it wasn't like a really sharp and difficult pivot for us, because we had already been doing this. And so it's great to communicate across the screen. There's so many advantages to doing that. The fact that you can see the material, slow it down. You have a pair of eyes, trained eyes looking at you. But then there's some things that happen live that will complement that to really make for the total package. And I'd love not just the training and the ability to, I always say the important thing is, if I can put my hands, and correct you can feel. There's something that's very authentic about that. We can sit and talk about it all day long, but when you go to the live experience, there's a connection there. There's also, aside from the training, a variety of things that take place that we get to connect. I personally enjoy all the side conversations. Inevitably, lifelong friendships have come from this. And that's the whole idea behind it, is to have a live, hands-on event, real quality instruction. You know, Ralph, we limit participation. We've done that from day one. And it's just so that we can get around. Our ratio we've determined is 6 caners, 6 participants to 1 instructor on the floor. I'll typically have at this point 3 to 4 instructors. I lead it all from the platform. But that's the idea, to have a hands-on experience.
Well, to me as a student, an online student, it's critical. I thank you for doing this and taking the time. And I know you're a very busy man, and to give me time during the day of the intensive, I'm really extra appreciative.
On day 1 of the intensive, just as we're starting.
You weren't busy enough.
But this is important. And Ralph, you know, when we say we're here to serve, either we're here to serve or we're not, and we'd like to think that we are. We do it in that spirit. So it's my pleasure always, please.
Part of the reason I'm really excited to find you, you know, I've been looking for the right kind of self-defense to add to my exercise program, kind of cross-training with a variety of different things. And to find you, what causes you to stand out for me, and I think the people will be listening to this too, is the strength of your scientific training and the strength of your academic studies into this. I mean, I know in the martial arts world they call you the medicine man. I would call you the brain of martial arts, honestly. Or you know, you're definitely the super nerd. I mean, you go on and get degrees. What has caused you to try and combine these two worlds of martial arts and healing arts? Such an unusual thing. What's driving this, Joe?
So very early on, I was exposed to as far as martial arts, we're talking martial arts, I have a very heavy background in the Japanese martial arts. And one of those arts in particular, which comes from a samurai lineage, had in it a healing art, a healing component. And so if you think about it, everybody, when they think martial arts, they automatically think maybe self-defense, maybe that's what they're thinking of. And of course, the media and movies, they've popularized it in a variety of ways. But think about it, it is in essence a mind-body integration. And if we're caring about the human brain and the body, and we come to the realization that you're not just a pile of bones, right, and that there's an emotional component, there's a mental component, then it would make sense that ideally it would have a system that allows you to restore. Right? And so very early on, that was a component of the martial art that I was studied, and I had the privilege of being trained in. It had a healing arts component to it. I think that's sparked it, right? And I took it where you have a combination of academia in there within the trenches. So you have the academics, and you have also the in the trenches experience of having done it, and then you have an integration of that. And I think that's what we're bringing here.
What kind of Japanese martial art?
So that Japanese martial art in particular was a jiu-jitsu system, was a samurai aiki jiu-jitsu system. Yeah, and that one in particular, you know, I noticed that the Japanese, you know, they have their finger pressure technique, which is a form of shiatsu, and they work with energy in the body and meridians and whatnot. They placed a special emphasis on the feet in particular. So this art in particular, well, why the feet? And then we started looking, well, it seems like it's a microcosm that connects the rest of the body. And then over in Europe, you know, as I did further studies, well, there's actually something out there called, you know, the reflexology and zone work, and you know, started putting 2 and 2 together. And at the end of the day, you know, all that theory is wonderful, but once we started putting on our hands, the proof is in the pudding, right? And there has to be an authenticity there. At the end of the day, results is the bottom line. And we certainly were seeing that, right, with those methods.
I imagine that you were training with sticks too, but it doesn't sound like it.
I was not training with sticks at the time because their tool of choice is the Japanese katana, the sword. Uh-huh. And I was enamored with that. The principles all come from sword training. Real important concepts. A lot of those concepts has transferred over to what we do today. And the idea was, you know, we're just thrilled with empty hand skill sets. But all the major arts, the tool, the sword, was the major art. So a samurai wouldn't think of going empty-handed into a confrontation. It was the sword, and then for times that you couldn't draw your sword, you found yourself. But it's a very important principle. The principles of the tool taught the empty hand, and that is a model that has trickled down to what we do today with American cane self-defense.
Well, I've not trained in Japanese arts. I've certainly read many of the books and some of the classics, and they're talking about the hara and the ki energy. I think for them it's Ki, Chinese Chi, and then you went with naturopathy instead of the traditional medical doctor route, and it's easy. I mean, for me to see why. I'm positing you learned from early on all about using this force, not in an abstract, but you use it, and now it's. Well, tell me about naturopathy. How's that different from regular medical training? I know it's 4 years.
Right, and there's I'll make the distinction there. So there's the naturopathic doctor who follows, the first do no harm principle, right, and nothing invasive, no use of medical drugs. Today you have naturopathic physicians who do go the route of studying pharmacology. My understanding is they even do minor surgery. So I don't do that. That's not what I do under that realm. But it's really looking at all the natural components. So where do you get these medical drugs? Well, they come from herbs, and so herbology is part of that study. So is the field of homeopathy, and so nutrition and proper care of the body and exercise and clean living and a variety of my area of specialty was putting on the hands. So very early on as a child, I learned that I could do things with my hands. Very early on, right?
No
So
kidding.
hands, feet, hands heating up, right, involuntarily. So when I would put my
I did not know this, Joe.
Yeah.
This is something new.
Well, that's where it comes from, and there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of stories that students can tell about. Hey, there's something about putting on the hands, and when he puts the hands, and so I realized this, and I had no idea until I ran into. Oh yeah, you're an energetic. There's electricity there. You can measure this, right? So you can measure heart activity. You can measure brain activity as well, and it's no different. It's no different with this. So naturopathy focuses on that, and my thing was body work. And so what I did afterwards was go ahead and to play by the rules. Florida law says if you're going to put your hands on someone and you're going to be doing any type of body work, then you need to be a licensed massage therapist. So I had to go back to school. I went the entire route and did the whole medical massage therapy program, taught at the college, taught anatomy, physiology, and clinical therapy at the college.
I thought she was a nerd.
Yeah. That.
You had to not only get the license, you had to teach it.
Yep. Developed a
degree in it.
proprietary way of doing that, and taught it for CEs, for continuing education as well. I taught that, and still to this day I'm in private practice. So what I do is put my hands. People come in for seeking pain relief. A lot of times, things that they haven't found a result with in conventional care. We don't make any promises. We don't make any medical claims whatsoever. We just vow to go ahead and listen to you, and then see if we can coax the body back to a state of balance.
And this is a well-established practice. Maybe not everyone has heard of it, but it was, I think, you, for a time anyway, were a certified quantum touch, I think is the trademark term, quantum touch practitioner, developed by a medical doctor who's promoted it, done a lot of research on it. This is something that is being tested and used by medical providers, including MDs, all over the country.
I was the one to introduce it here in Miami. I was the first to introduce that here, and took it all the way through there. Yep, that was part of that at one point.
My background as a lawyer, and I know Florida's very conservative. In many states, you would be Dr. Robaina. I know you wouldn't do necessarily surgery, but here they just don't recognize it, and so they do require the massage therapy. And so the work that you give, your healing work, involves using physical touch to impact the energies on the body that then impact the physical body too?
So what I do, the crux of what I do is I work with the nerve system, and that's my whole specialty, is how can I be a mediator of to the brain and communicate to the brain the nerve system that essentially runs everything. And the analogy I always use is, Ralph, if you go to a hotel, you go to an establishment, and you don't like the service, something that you need corrected, you can talk to the person who's serving you, you can talk to the manager. And I'm using the analogy in the human body. I go straight to the owner, to the boss, and that's the brain. And so what I do is I go there and I send messages. There's a variety of ways that you can communicate with the nerve system to quiet down. And so we used to use, I think in one of our web pages for therapy, it says experience the touch that quiets you. And why is that so important? Because nobody ever comes in on that aspect of it and have to say, you know what, you're not stressed out enough. You need more stress in your life. You need to get revved up a little bit more. We need more sympathetic overload. Quite the opposite. What we need is a quieting down of that nerve system. And so that's what I do, is communicate to the nerve system that it's okay to let go. And once you start doing that, I in essence give you an opportunity, give the nerve system an opportunity to reset. So think of the computer, you hit the reset button, you get to start again. People say, oh my gosh, you've done wonders for my stress. When you analyze and say, well, I can't directly affect what's going on in your life, but what I can influence via the nerve system is how you respond to what's going on in your life. So it's like grabbing the garbage can, dumping it, emptying it, and you get to start brand new. And that's where people say, oh wow, I feel like I'm floating, I feel great. Well, that's what happens when you quiet sympathetic overload, bring in parasympathetic activity, and bring balance.
Well, this kind of energy work, I think, is critical, and that's one of the things that makes you so unusual. But you talk about how you do pain relief and peak performance, and then you mentioned not only athletes, which I expected, but you also mentioned musicians, which I didn't see coming. And talk a little bit about, I think we mentioned pain relief, because I think that's what brings most people, but, I'm interested in, knock on wood, I'm lucky, no pain, but boy, I could sure be a lot stronger and a lot healthier than I am, that's for sure.
Yeah, and so as far, and a good portion of the people that come in there, they are athletes, right? And so if you look at it from the standpoint that maybe you're a performer, you're in the arts, you're in the theater, you are a musician, you have to go in there. There's something about when it's go time and show time, and what happens with the stress, and once you start producing adrenaline and you're on overload. And so great things happen when, again, you're able to communicate to the nerve system and balancing everything out at that level, because it has an influence on everything else. Everything from your blood pressure, your circulatory system, it controls stress hormones. Right? And it's amazing the microscopic amounts of stress hormone that would be produced to create something really big, right? So an example would be at the pituitary level. Hey, everything has to be perfectly balanced. Too much growth hormone, just a little bit too much growth hormone, you get somebody, right, you get acromegaly, you get a giant. Not enough, and it goes the other way. So it's a constant yin and yang balancing at that level, and that's under the control of the nerve system.
Well, this is pretty advanced. Obviously, you've put a lot of thought into this. I noticed it's more and more we're seeing the Bachelor of Science in Exercise programs. You got that going back, and then you went ahead and you got a master's. So where did you study for these exercises?
That's so right here in Florida International. I'm in FIU University. Yeah.
It's a good school down here.
It is a phenomenal school. It's boy has it changed since I was going there back in the day. But I attended here, and then.
Now, how'd you pay for your way through college, by the way?
So I was, as an exercise physiology major, I was already working as a personal fitness trainer. And so it was great. The pay was phenomenal. The hours were great. And so that's essentially how we did, how I did that.
And tell me, what is a Master's of Sports Science? That's what you
Master of Sports Science is a degree. So in essence, you're taking this exercise physiology and you're applying to sports itself and peak performance. And it's pretty wide ranging in everything, not just from exercise physiology, but also nutrition and how it is that you can go and really function at your very best, methods of recuperation, supplementation that might help. So it's an integrative approach.
I'm guessing, did you focus in on martial arts sports? Or?
I didn't. It was actually, I had the honor and the privilege of working with, I was a student of Dr. Fred Hatfield, who is credited in the sports science. He's one of the co-founders of the International Sports Sciences Association, and I was essentially a disciple. I've been reading him since I was in my teens, and very early in my 20s, I went out to meet him, and I said, I think I can be an instructor for the ISSA. And I'll never forget what he said. The ISSA had course. He, of course, is a legend in the powerlifting field. Others that he had teaching, Tom Platz and others, bodybuilding legends. And he said, young man, the reason that I'm even listening to you is because you took this long drive over here to see me. So there's probably something about you, because the average individual is not going to do that, he said. But here's one question. Why would anybody listen to you? And that right there was, that was such because when you compare all these other guys, they had a name. And here's this young 20-something year old, and why would anybody listen to you? What have you done? And I said, the reason is because I know I took a leap here, and I said, I know your material better than anybody else. And I started just reciting one after another, his principles, things he said, things he wrote in what magazine, at what age. And he couldn't believe it. He was like, you know what? And so he found a spot for me in something, the direction they were moving, and that was in the Hispanic division. And so I'm fluent in Spanish. I read it, I write it, and I worked there in developing early on and taught for him in the Hispanic division. Right here locally, Biltmore, matter of fact, was the first one that I taught, was over at the Biltmore Hotel. I taught the ISSA certification in Spanish, translated their manual over to Spanish, and learned a lot from him because he brought a lot of the science to the fitness industry.
Well, most people would have stopped there, but no, you went on and wanted more education. A traditional route might be to get a PhD maybe, but you didn't. You decided to branch out and go a different way. And so tell us, and I know we're getting back to the naturopathy again, but what is it that caused you to change the normal academic route?
What is it that caused it in particular is a great question, but I have to imagine that there is a gene in there somewhere, because mom and dad were both medical students. And traditional medicine, allopathic medicine. And so when I said this is great, we have all the exercise science stuff and we're serving in that capacity. But there was something else. So if you dial back before them, the whole concept of the healing and everything, well, healing per se is not part. There's some arts there that are missing. They're not part of sports science and exercise science. We have the information, but what about really? What am I going to do with these hands, right? Lord didn't give me these hands just to, no, got to put these hands and do what, there's a very strong calling there. And their response was, if you're going to do that, especially back in the day, even today, right, you say, well, what's naturopathy? It's not like everybody knows it's a household. Not quite. We're going in that direction still, but not quite. Their response was, for that, you just become a medical doctor. And there was a bit of a clash there, more so with my father, who was a man of science, and, what is this, homeopathy, and what's the science behind it? And we clashed back and forth, right? So my idea was prevention. His idea of prevention was very different, and so there was a clashing there. There was a bit of rebelling on my end. And but that was what I was called to do. Was I wanted to go that route to feel more complete, if you will. There was something missing, And that was what was being offered with naturopathy. I found that you can integrate everything under one umbrella.
Now, did I hear that right? You said both of your parents
Both.
were in medical
Both.
school at the same time?
Same time, my father was 1 year ahead. He was an ACE medical student.
Where is that,
he
here in
taught,
Miami?
No, in Spain.
In Spain, okay.
Well, I was made in Spain.
Made in Spain, okay. Not Cuba.
I was not made in Cuba, so my descendants are all, my family is Cuban and from Spanish descent, and I was made in Spain. So they both had left Cuba, gone to Spain, and they were medical students there. So.
Now, are they medical doctors?
My mother remained in the field. My father did not remain there, but right up until his last days, he could have a conversation of anatomy and physiology. He was still very sharp with that. So, a very sharp fellow.
Well, I see where your predilection to studies and really understanding it comes from now, and it all makes sense. And kind of a rebellion. You're going to take it to the next level. And honestly, I think most of the listeners here, we agree with you. We're glad you did. We're glad you pioneered out.
It's a great story with him in particular. He developed prostate cancer eventually. He had a concern, his whole life with that, and you never forget the day he lays it on you, and just in casual conversation. Oh, by the way, did I tell you I tested prostate cancer? I said, no kidding. He said, yeah. And so he started going radiation treatments, and I remember having a conversation. My father never believed in the work that I did from it was never at the level of allopathic medicine. So this was always, his thing. My younger sister, she had an accident one time, ice skating. I remember late at night, she says, hey, she's got a pain in her neck. You think I can help her? My sister called it magical. He thanked me for it. He thanked me for doing that, and that was it. He didn't question, how did you do it? What did you do? He just said, thank you for helping out your sister. He turns out he develops prostate cancer, and his medical doctor calls out to me and says, listen, your father, I can't give him any more radiation. He's a very stubborn man. He knows it all, and his prostate is the size of a grapefruit. So the only thing that I can do is I'm suggesting maybe, your stepmom says you're a natural doctor, right? Maybe there's something you can give him. And I said, the only thing I can do is offer to my father. He's not a... So I said, listen, I spoke to your doctor. Worst thing that can happen with my methods, by the way, are nothing. So, and surprisingly, he said, yeah, we'll go ahead and give it a try. And I remember when I went to see him, his weight was probably about 180 pounds. When I saw him, when I went to see him, he was 147 pounds. And I was alarmed. My face was like, probably showed, because he told me, oh, don't worry about what you're seeing here, because I'm not ready to go and this, that. And I asked his doctor, and I said, Joe, it's not the cancer that's spreading or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's just he's in so much discomfort, he's miserable, and he won't eat. And so I said, okay. So we got to work. He finally let me do some work. I remember being able to tell him step by step, because I had done this for so long. This is what you're going to experience. This is what's going to happen step by step. And to make a long story short, within a period of 3 months, he started regaining his weight. He started smiling again. The sense of humor came back. He regained his weight. I remember his doctor calling me and saying, hey, I don't know what you're doing. Do you take insurance? I want to refer patients your way. And I remember joking with her, because she was a female. I said, but you don't have a prostate. How are we going to do that? We had a laugh about that. But he then became my biggest fan when it came to the healing,
so good.
Right? So it does have that story, and then almost to the point where he tilted completely on the other side, and then started repeating everything that I had, communicated to him about, hey, allopathic medicine, best in the world for diagnosis, this and that, but this would be an integrated approach. He became a real champion of what I did, so because he had experienced it.
I'm so glad that had a happy ending. A lot of times it doesn't. So you were able to do that with your father. I think everybody has something like that with their father. Yours is pretty classic.
Ralph, and I'll never forget his first treatment. He commented to my stepmom. He said, "This is exactly what I needed." So I think that there's an inner physician in there that knows when you're, when you finally find what it is that would benefit you most. I think that there's something in there, that nervous system that knows and says, "Yeah, more of this, more of this." Right?
Now, a few people have done what you're trying to do, but I don't know that anyone has followed the naturopathy tradition. They've gone acupuncture and more Chinese and Japanese. And what is the relationship between the kind of thing you're doing by just touching with your fingers and your hands and the energy coming out? How does that compare with acupuncture?
Ralph, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap. And so out of necessity, if you're going to therapy school, you will study the meridian system, energy pathways. That's how they view it. And so rather than using something external like a needle, and by the way, I think acupuncture is fantastic. I think it's totally solid. It's a mind-body therapy. There's a lot of literature on it and a lot of bottom line results with it. So love acupuncture. The difference is now you're using your hands to go in there, and it's not just limited to opening energy pathways. There's a lot of overlap there, right? And so I may go ahead and take it to where what I want to do is release fascia in there. But there's research that says energy meridians and pathways go through that fascia as well. So there's a lot of overlap.
Well, you said the magic word fascia. Now, if I was Groucho Marx, there'd be a $50 bill to come down. I mean, I love your phrase, escaping the fascia straitjacket. As far as I know, you coined that. Would you explain that? I mean, could you unpack that for us? I mean, starting with the basics, what is fascia and what does it mean? Because I think you really got it there.
So to give you, it's in essence, in a nutshell, is what holds the entire body together. There's no other way of saying that. So for people that cook, and just to give you a visual of that, you cook chicken. Chicken has this skin, and everybody's familiar with that. And then if you peel that skin, there's like a translucent skin. It's very thin that goes under that. That's fascia. That's what holds everything down, right down to the cellular level. Now, the literature will tell you if there's any injury, if there's been any trauma, you exercise, you're putting stress on that structure. A fascial adhesion, right? So you have surgery, you had an injury, there's cutting. The body starts laying down scar tissue, and there's fascial tightening there. It can exert up to 2,000 pounds over a structure. And so what that means in terms of not just restricting mobility, circulation, oxygenation, but it affects pain as well. And that's why I refer to it as a straitjacket, because once you start ironing this out, you start coming out of that jacket, great things start to happen, because now you've enhanced circulation, range of motion, mobility, oxygenation, nutrient flow, all these good things that start happening.
Let me just flash back real quickly to the martial arts. I mean, people know you, it's easy to research it, but I mean, how many black belts do you have anyway? What are the various disciplines? I mean, you've been inducted into so many
Hall of Fames.
I mean, incredible history, but can you, I won't know them all, but just maybe some of the names where you have achieved that mastery level.
My first martial art was actually, and it's the topic here of the American Cane boxing this week, was boxing.
No kidding.
My father was the one who initiated. He used to box in Cuba, and boy, I really got into it. At first.
Did your family have something to do with boxing?
We're big. We're very big, just fan-wise. My dad used to do it. He wanted to do it competitively. My grandfather, his father, said, absolutely not. He said, and I quote, "You're smart. You have a brain. You're going to, you're going to use that brain. Boxing for self-defense and for fitness, but you're going to go to school and And by the time I was 10 years old, I wanted to fight. I wanted to be a boxer. And he pretty much alongside.
Granddad was smart. So he became an MD, a doctor, and married and has a wife as a doctor and a son as a doctor.
Yeah.
But he wanted to be a boxer.
He competitively, we just love it. And so the entire family, every time there's a boxing event, we would, and to this day, he passed, and it's never quite been the same, but my family still gathers around, and we like that. And so that was the first thing. He, as a child, hey, this is how you throw hands, boom, 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 and that helped me incredibly. Once I started getting formally trained judo, attaining a black belt in judo, there was some taekwondo and karate styles that went there as well. And then I focused in on what I would call the Aiki martial arts, right, which is all based around this samurai Aiki Jiu-Jitsu system. So things like Hakaru Jiu-Jitsu, Aikido, the Daito Ryu Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, Hapkido. Yeah, I taught it here for many years. So I became a special, quote unquote, a specialist in that area. There were such a thing, attaining master level ranks in each one. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's so impressive what you did, and then starting your own school. Now, everyone knows, of course, you're the cane master, and you started your own school on this. But I'm not sure I know, how did you come up with this idea? I mean, where did it come from? Nobody was doing this, and you just started it.
Is it the idea of the cane you're asking about?
Yeah, as
so,
the weapon.
So I mentioned one of the martial arts was Hapkido, right? One of the martial arts. They did have a demonstration that they would teach to the higher ranks. They would teach the cane, and so, boy, that was at first didn't catch on. The cane.
The cane with the hook.
Yeah, the J.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh,
with
I didn't
the
know
horn
that.
and crook. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, they actually taught that, and Jihan J claims, Grandmaster, he claims that he's the one who integrated there. As it turned out, many years later, I met him in Atlantic City, and there are photos of me. I thanked him for it, because I guess if it weren't for him, then I would have never even had seen the concept. But what made sense was I had already trained for many years with the katana and different martial art, quote unquote weapons that are part of that, of the arts and the culture. I said, you know what? That's really neat, but boy, I live in Miami. Can't hang around with a katana, nunchucks, or a pair of sais and go down South Beach. Can't do that. Hang around with that in your back pocket. That's not going to be a good thing. But here's this cane that, let me get this straight. You have this, has a shaft on there with a meat hook on the end, and this thing is legal to carry anywhere.
Yeah.
I just thought it was so cool that I could train in with this one tool for self-defense, and then be able to actually carry it with me wherever I would go. Now, what is odd about that was that I was in my 20s. And so you don't see 20-year-olds and say, oh, wow, yeah, how cool, I want to hang around with a cane, and do this. And so that's what sparked the whole thing. And just the whole idea of having a tool readily available that, it quote unquote, it flies right under the radar. It hasn't been seen as a traditional one, and you can go ahead and hang around with this. I thought that was fascinating.
So you thought about it. It was strategy. You basically.
It just made sense.
Yeah.
It was something that just made sense. I mean, we put in hours, right, or years of practicing this one thing that has other benefits. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It has empty hand benefits and hand-eye coordination. But you get all that with the cane, and wait a minute, on top of that, as an actual tool for defense, it's an impact tool, and here we go. Oh, great, I can have it, it's already in my hand. It doesn't have to be drawn. I don't have to draw it. It's already drawn.
But you didn't have an injury or something that caused
you
to use the cane?
No, I didn't.
I
need it medically. I needed it many years later, not too long ago, I think like 3 years now, when I did have a ruptured Achilles, and there I did use it. But by that time, boy, that was already, my training was established. It was part of the rehab. It's well documented. But no, early on, no injury.
When you often mention how good the cane is for a knife attack, and you've said it's designed for a knife attack. Were you attacked by people with knives?
Was not, but I had to study it. Had to study it out of necessity. Had seen what the injuries were. I hate it. They're gruesome. It's a very fast and furious attack. We're going to see that this weekend here. Anyone can avail themselves of a knife. You don't need a concealed weapons permit. They're inexpensive. Everybody has a kitchen knife, and so yes, our basis for it It comes from knife. I needed something really. I was looking for something. What is the best defense against thing? And the answer to that was distance. And this thing is tough to beat when it comes to distance. Yeah. It's already drawn.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I didn't start with your program until September, but I watched since September how the cane boxing has originated and has now become the focus on it. Why cane boxing? This is new, but tell me the combination. I mean, I'm sold on it, but tell us why the two go together.
So it's new to the public, and I'll tell you a funny behind-the-scenes incident. You know Master Keith Melton.
Sure.
Over at Cane Master. So he's coming down. He hasn't missed an immersion, incidentally, since his first one. So he is walking, talking, living proponent of the cane and what we do. But he was doing some of the, we're training the staff in some of the drills, and he's seeing me work with Kiko, the lead instructor from Miami over at the headquarters. And these 2-3-2 drills that you're going to be doing, which they challenge you physically, mentally, it's brain training, it's got it all integrated. And he said a comment, he said, Kiko, did you just pick up all these drills, right? Because, boy, I'm looking at these for the first time. Kiko said, oh, no, sir, I've been doing this for years with him. So a lot of the material that we're bringing, the curriculums that we're bringing to, they're new to the market, per se, but they're not new to us. Now, these are things we have been working on before. The name is new. And so boxing, because it's based a lot of it on the empty hand component that you're doing, it's very similar. You're hooking, you're jabbing, you're crossing. It has that component. You're ducking, you're rolling with the punches, hand-eye coordination, done with a shorter stick. That's by design, which is designed for close quarter combat. So the really neat thing about it is that, yes, it has the practical self-defense applications. When you set that cane down, you would do the same thing empty hand, and then it also has that fitness component to it. So boxers are known to be some of the best trained. So now you can go ahead and train with this cane, and it parallels boxing, right? But you have the cane, you have the empty hand, and it's a way to train and get fit without getting hit right in the ring.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the cane advantages the distance, but what if you lose that? What if they absorb the blow? They got a lot of muscles and they can handle it. It doesn't break their arm and they keep coming at you, then what?
And what if you're ambushed, right? And so we're human, right? And so we didn't see it coming. We had a distraction, came out of the bushes, came away from your field of vision, and now you're in a situation where they broke through that. What if you lose your cane? You drop your cane. Who's going to recover that? Because whoever recovers it has the advantage. And what do you do with the empty hand? And so this ACB, American Cane Boxing, does cover these areas.
Well, it just makes sense. I mean, and I don't know if you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, but I have long been. And of course, Moriarty was a boxing champion, and the two of them in the final fight, it all came down to boxing.
And they use, that's where the Bartitsu comes from.
Yeah.
And so we're getting a lot of positive feedback there, and because of course they do the boxing and they do the cane, they do a different style of cane, but what they're finding here is structure. Where the cane, this is what you do first, second, and third. This is where you are now in the timeline of your training. This is what I have to go, as opposed to something that's being patched together right from old text, because it never came to be. Some have referred to it as what Bartitsu could have been, right? And that's one way of looking at it. And so, yeah, we welcome all those who have an interest there in Bartitsu, which was a really neat idea.
No, I mean, and I'm interested in the 20s, George Pilate, who started it. He was a boxing trainer and a boxer too.
He was.
So, I mean, the boxing is part of it. Of course, everyone knows the Jedi not only know the lightsaber, but if their lightsaber's knocked out, they can use their hands, and they can use the Force, etc. Is that an advanced immersion? I'm not sure if I qualify for that yet. I want to see that one.
That's a surprise.
But I mean, the similarities are all there. Now I had let me just get serious just for a second. I mean, here we are. We're both doing using precautions. We're in a pandemic, in this coronavirus. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? What kind of insights can you give us on the pandemic and this one in particular, but just in general? What are your thoughts about this?
Well, there's the reality of what's happening, right? And just from the pathology perspective, and there's this, this pandemic and this virus and everything that's going on there. And then from that perspective, what's always made sense, because it's a battle that's really tough to beat, because it's invisible. You don't see it. You only see the result. It's an invisible enemy. And so what makes sense there would be to strengthen your immune system and really take care of yourself. And that's part of what we do. Do we lead with it? Is it the leading? Right now, everybody's coming for protection, self-protection. But if you analyze this, Ralph, that is a form of self-protection. I often ask, and I say, and it's not to demean the value of self-defense and personal safety. We're all about that. But I'll ask and I'll say, how many of you were physically assaulted last week? And no hands go up. I'll ask, what about the last 2 weeks? What about last month? No hands go up. How many of you are in pain regularly? How many of you are stressed to the gills? How many of you feel that you could benefit from losing weight? How many of you have health challenges? These are things that we deal with every day. So what we do plays a role in that, right? Self-care, improving the immune system, taking proper care of the body, but then the mind as well. Because here's what we find. The two biggest emotional components that dip the immune system and just throw everything out of whack are fear and worry. Fear and worry. That 1-2 is really powerful. And so what happens is, I always say, it makes a flick feel like a punch. So it really magnifies everything, those two emotions. And so I think if we're working towards that, and with what we do, I always say, and the coaches are trained in doing this, if we can get people to hit the pause button, right, on those two things, and we can get them to engage mind and body and just forget, crack a smile, laugh, then I think we're doing something positive during a time of adversity.
Well, thanks for that good advice. Good advice. What about we're in similar times too. A lot of us have anger problems and anger issues, and it's worry, fear, but there's also fight or flight, and fight is part of it. And I know one of the things I like about your system is practical. It's not to go around learning how to beat up people, but to be able to avoid confrontation, and if you're in one, to get out safely. But is there something to being able to channel your anger in a non-aggressive way against people, but channel it out in kind of a sport, or hitting a bag, or hitting poor old Bob, that's so hard to assemble? I mean, what role does that play in in martial arts in general, just working out our anger by getting rid of it?
Because it's a mind and body integration. You can't really just have one without the other. So if I have all this emotional, there's the anger and it's pent up and it's been building up, you're going to need ideally you're going to need an outlet. And if that outlet would be physical, and there's something about, even in our fitness classes, you take a drone cane. For our listeners that are not familiar with it, it's a padded cane. It's designed for you to make contact without breaking something or hurting anyone. And you go to a bag, you go to a heavy bag, you go to a stand-up ball bag, and now you go out there and you start hitting with this, and boy, it gives you a safe outlet for doing this, because it's what provides that outlet, and you do it in such a way that you do it safely, and you get to address that instead of penting it up and then have it reflect in different ways that are undesirable, that later on you might regret doing.
That's for sure. How important in your work, I'm going to try and wrap it up with some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
You can give shorter answers, because I know you got to go.
Yep.
Postures and alignment. Seems to be an important part of your work with touch. What is the importance to you of having the right postures, getting into postures as part of an exercise, and getting your body in alignment? It's one of the first
assessments we do. So we'll do a posture, see where there's deviation, and we look to bring that back to what would be best for that person at the stage that they're at right now. Keep in mind that this is the house, right? And the house, in there you're housing organs. It affects circulation. So it might possibly, you can actually be putting pressure on organs and whatnot if you have an imbalance there. So we look to proper care of the form that houses organs, and everything else is vital in there. So yeah, it's an important role.
One of my favorite videos you have is of the staff, the 5-foot staff, which I brought with me, by the way. I'm not going to, hope to warm up tomorrow on that. And you've talked about escaping the fascia straitjacket, but how important is it to be doing this work that people not become stiff, that they maintain flexibility, not just of the fascia, but of their whole body?
Important enough that I start my day with it. It's a daily thing for me. And that's because the focus has been, since this whole thing started, as far as the physical component for self-care, has been to strengthen and lengthen. Strengthen the body, strengthen the muscles, and then keep pliability. So the ability, I always say caners should have the capacity to squat down without pain. They should be able to move. You want that freedom of movement. And it really is a matter of use it or lose it. And it's not more is better, right? We have to train smarter. Better is better. Right, so adding more time to it or doing it harder, not necessarily better. And that's one of the things that I always point out, because it doesn't make any sense to do more than injure yourself, and then you go back to the starting position. So you really want to know what you're doing with that. But yeah, it's a vital aspect of it.
In part of your film, you're a master, and yet you're still practicing balance a little bit too on there. How important is that?
Balance for the rest of your life. These are all these little components that come into play by what we do. And there's an emphasis. Now I'm using the word play. Nobody likes to exercise. A lot of people, physicians have been trying to get people to go ahead and do exercise. Nobody does it. If you listen to the feedback and the result, Joe, your program has gotten me to move. Right, our emphasis is in getting people to move, and it's hidden under play, right? And so we're playing with this cane, we're having fun with it, people are laughing, good things are happening, and in the process we're getting people to move, and when we move, we know great things happen.
Another B for me is breath. How important is breath and breathing, and what are your quick thoughts on breath?
I'll give you an interest, and this is an actual, I don't do cardio work per se. In other words, I won't go out, I don't go out running, put a lot of wear and tear on the body, and nothing wrong. That's just, what I find in my practice. I'm not on a treadmill or on a bike, mindlessly pedaling away, not doing that. But I do practice breathing, what I call reset breathing. My heart rate is just as good. My wife puts in her time on her bike, and because that's what she enjoys doing, and that's a whole nother thing. If you enjoy doing that, that's great. But my cardio per se, in terms of my resting heart rate, or if you take me to the altitude, we go to the mountains a lot, we like doing that, is just as good as an endurance trained athlete, yet I don't engage in that activity, because what I do is I do that by regulating my breathing. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a world-class marathon runner or the equivalent. That's not nowhere near what I'm saying. But for a fellow that doesn't engage in that, it's just as good as people that are doing that. And those are just the numbers, right? In terms of resting heart rate and cardio output. And if you take me out there, I can breeze through going up mountains and different elevations and whatnot.
You're not just doing breathing exercises, breathing while you're doing cane spinning.
Well, I have a segment where I just practice my breathing.
Okay.
There is a type of breathing where you regulate your breath. And when you're able to do that, again, you can regulate the nerve system, and that's the secret.
What word do you use? What name have you heard?
Reset breathing.
Reset breathing?
Reset, because we're resetting the nerve system.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So that's another thing you
Yeah.
teach. Jeez. Okay, now so that's interesting about aerobics, because you're getting it, you're finding. You would know, you study everything, but not actually by running.
Not necessarily. There's more than one way to skin a cat when it comes to that, and you get to do it without putting a lot of wear and tear on the body.
Now, what about strength training? How is it important to have strength?
Absolutely. That's why we say strengthen and lengthen, and strengthening is just huge. Especially as the years go by. Things like grip strength, right, which we start. All these other components are really a variation of strength, including your back. Well, I'm not strong enough to stay up. Oh, my hip, I can't stand on one because I can't. I'm not strong enough to do it. So strength is like the foundation there.
Well, I tell you, as a newbie, but I was a golfer for 55 years. I thought I had strong hands. The cane has really strengthened my hands and arms because it requires it. It is more physically challenging than golf. Sorry, I mean, maybe in hard skill golf it is, but the movement is very physically challenging.
Ralph, some of your classmates, at least one of them, and she's going to be here this week, I know who has, she was able to put her carpal tunnel surgery on hold or do away with that altogether because of the strengthening that she's had now from doing it. And again, good things happen when you get moving. But that's just one example. And again, we don't make medical claims, but that's the review of caners. That's what they say. That's what they say.
Now, I'm still intrigued about the music thing, because you don't know this, but one of the things I do is I create meditation music, and I have a few CDs out and things like that. How important is music to you in your exercise programs? And you know, I think I know the answer, but share that with us.
It's a part of caning. It's always been there from the onset, and I'd love to see more caners do it. The caner circle itself, it's always done to music, and it's just part of the artistic aspect of it. And it's crazy because sometimes they'll see me move, and I remember on more than one occasion people say, "What music are you listening to internally while you're moving like that?" And what it is the way that we have it set up, it's almost like we often laugh because you can put any type of music and you're caning and it almost seems like it fits. And are you really listening to that or how does that work? But it's just a feel-good artistic component to it that brings up the vibe and produces endorphins. It just adds to that feel-good aspect of it.
Well, let's maybe end on a deeper note. I mean, I know from hearing you talk and seeing your posts that you are a spiritual person, and it means a lot to you. And we know that for longevity, it helps to have spiritual beliefs. It just to gain that comfort, and also for community. And the people that are living long have this spiritual connection. They have the God connection. And oftentimes that's part of the community. So I'm very interested in hearing, you know, you don't have to share too much if you don't want to, but I'd like to know a little bit about your spiritual beliefs.
It's at the foundation of everything. And, you know, if you're going to ask me about my faith, I'm a Christian, you know, Bible-based a Christian.
Well, if you're Spanish, I'm assuming you're Catholic.
I was 11 years of Catholic school.
Yeah.
And here's an interesting statistic, and it's not, I don't want to, you know, I have a lot of Catholic friends, and so, but the interesting part about it was I couldn't tell you 2 Bible verses, you know, back in the day, and, you know, after 11 years of Catholic school, you know, yeah, the pretty should have, but going back to that, it's at the foundation. I talked to the coaches about it, and I let them know that, in essence, what we do is in the spirit of serving your fellow man. And I tell them, listen, I live by a formula, and you don't have to make it your template. My intent is not to force down my beliefs down anybody's throat. But I also am quick to point out that if you have a problem, you know, with my beliefs and the way that I do that, and some days, you know, my beliefs in that are not real popular, I'm probably not the guy, you know, that you want to go with, because, and I'm brutally honest about this, because it's interwoven into how we serve. And I'll give you a couple examples. You asked me about spirituality, my faith. It's at the core of everything that I do. So I have this 4F template. You may have noticed I like to structure and like to put things into templates.
You're the brain.
But it's the 4F, right? So it's my faith, right? My family, my future, and my fun, right?
4F.
Yeah, 4F. But everything stems from that faith. And here's an example. So the coaches that are coming on board with us, and you'll often hear us say, and we said this earlier, we're here to serve. It's a way of loving your fellow man. And it has nothing to do with an emotional, everybody when they think love, you think of a romantic love or a love like you might love your kids. Really what it is a decision to act on that and that other person's best interest. And not only that, but called upon to go even beyond that to over-deliver, right, in that person's experience. And that's how we come. We come from that perspective. And I believe that if you're coming from that perspective, you're covering that second rule there that says, love thy neighbor, right? You're here to serve your fellow man. And service is a way of loving that individual, which is really just making a decision to act in their best interest.
A decision.
It's a decision. It's not tied into emotional. You know that, and anybody who's married know this, and anybody who's, it just is. Those feelings, to keep that going, we're so imperfect. Sooner or later, you wake up one morning and you're like, oh, I just don't feel like this today. But if you've made the decision to hold yourself to those standards of service to your fellow man, then hey, that's just the way we roll. That's just the way we do things.
Walking your talk. That's so refreshing, so glad, so great to meet you, a true legend who walks this talk every day. I'm so excited to be here and start the intensive, and I know you got a lot to do. Thank you so much for your time.
The pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
We'll do the
You
bump
bet.
of the
You bet.
elbow here.
Elbow bump.